स्मरामस्तदेकं भजामः तदेकं जगत्साक्षिरूपं नमामः तदेकं निधानं निरालम् अमीशं भवाम्भोधिभूतं शरण्यं व्रजामः। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्ति. On that alone do we meditate, that alone do we worship, to that alone, the witness of the universe, do we bow, to that one who is our sole eternal support, the self-existent Lord, the raft to safety across the ocean of this world, do we come for refuge. Om, peace, peace, peace. Good morning.
Morning.
Lovely to be here with you this morning, and it's a really beautiful day. So, our topic is an interesting one to me. I hope some of you will find it interesting. The topic is from the Himalayan heights to the oceanic depths. So this seems like two opposite concepts. They, of course, both have a geographical reference to the highest peaks, the highest points on Earth, the Himalayan peaks, and the depths of the ocean, the lowest points on the surface of the Earth. And what does all this have to do with Vedanta and spiritual life? Well, I propose that we are actually called to do both. We are called to ascend to the heights and to descend, to dive down into the depths. The sages, the Vedantic sages of all the religions often speak of the ascent to the divine, that we have to rise to meet God. We have to ascend to spiritual experience, to spiritual union, climbing higher and higher, as it were, beyond our mundane selves, beyond our bodies and minds, beyond this world of names and forms, to reach the infinite, to reach the divine. Like a Himalayan trek. When we undertake a Himalayan trek, a mountain ascending the peak of the Himalayas, it takes a tremendous struggle to climb in the mountains. At each step, we come one step closer to our goal. Each step we leave behind what was behind us, and we take the next step. We have to leave our luggage because it's too heavy to take us up there in the high, with the thin air and the lack of oxygen to drop all our bags, and finally we reach the summit. We have to leave behind first the forests, and then we leave behind the grassy meadows until there's only rock and snow. And then when we reach the summit, we have reached the top of the world. There is no higher place to go. We have reached the highest. So similarly in spiritual life, we have to leave behind our old selves. We have to leave behind all those lower tendencies. Interesting, we call them lower tendencies, right? Our lust, greed, anger, pride, envy, all these tendencies. If we want to attain the highest, if we want to attain union with the divine, we have to leave these behind. These take us away. So we shed all that baggage, as it were. And finally, we have to leave behind even our mind and our sense of a separate self, that I am a separate self, that me, that ego, that unright I. We have to let that go to attain the summit of spiritual realization. And then we realize that the little me that we thought was me actually wasn't me. That it wasn't quite real. That the real me is none other than He. That the real me is none other than she, the infinite, the divine. That the I am, that infinite existence, consciousness, bliss, absolute. So this is the idea of ascending the Himalayan peak of spiritual realization. At the same time, we have another idea, that actually to find God, we have to dive deep, deep within in meditation. Like a deep sea dive, we descend deeper and deeper into the ocean that is the divine. Perhaps it's like diving into the crystal clear waters of the Pacific Ocean on a sunny day, and diving deep down, surrounded by water on every side. And above, below, all around us, we're surrounded only with an infinite expanse of water. And it's like a baptism. We're fully immersed in the purifying waters of the ocean, clean and healed and fortified and fulfilled. And then maybe as we go further down, we find that we are not what we thought we were. We find that this physical body is not actually a physical body, it's a body made of salt, like the salt doll in Sri Ramakrishna's parable. And as we start to sink further and further, that salt starts to dissolve in the water of the ocean until we gradually melt away. And as the last of that salt dissolves, only the infinite ocean remains. The Pacific Ocean, of course, is an ocean of salt water, and the divine ocean is an ocean of infinite consciousness and bliss. The Upanishads, our sacred scriptures of Vedanta, call it Brahman. And they describe this very image of being surrounded by water on all sides. They say, we are surrounded by Brahman on all sides. It's a beautiful verse. Brahmai vedam amritam purastad brahma paschad brahma dakshinataschotarena adhashchorbham cha prasitam brahmai vedam vishvamidam varishtham. That immortal Brahman alone is before, that Brahman is behind, that Brahman is to the right and to the left. Brahman alone pervades everything, above and below. This universe is that supreme Brahman alone. So that's a glimpse of the experience of the illumined sages who realized that everything is permeated with infinite consciousness and bliss, including their own selves. So Sri Ramakrishna asks us to dive into this ocean. We are, of course, already immersed in it, only we're not aware of that. We don't realize it. So he tells us, dive into that. He is telling one devotee, actually, it's Bankim Chandra. He's not exactly a devotee. He's a famous author, a Bengali author. And he had come to Sri Ramakrishna, and Sri Ramakrishna tells him, let me tell you something. You won't gain anything by just floating on the surface. Dive a little under the water. The gems lie deep under the water. So what is the good of throwing your arms and legs about on the surface? A real gem is heavy. It doesn't float, it sinks to the bottom. To get the real gem, you must dive deep. Of course, he's talking about diving deep within, diving deep in meditation. And so often it seems like when we sit for meditation, we find it very difficult to dive deep. We find like we're still floating on the surface. The mind is running here and there. We're trying to go deep. And Bankim voices this frustration in a very humorous way. He says, "Sir, what can we do? We are tied to a cork. It prevents us from diving." Tied to a cork. So we're floating on the surface of the ocean, and we have our tied to a cork, or our life preserver on, life vest. So we can't go down. We can't. How do we go down deep? Sri Ramakrishna gives an interesting reply. He says, "All sins vanish if one only remembers God." Now, Bankim wasn't talking about sins. And Vedanta also doesn't talk about sin. What's Sri Ramakrishna talking about? Well, we don't accept the idea of sin at least not in the Western sense, but certainly we recognize that we don't always act up to our own highest nature. We don't always say the kindest thing that could be said. We don't always treat others with as much love and respect as we would if we saw the divine shining in their hearts. So, all right, we're not perfect yet. We have made mistakes in life. These mistakes create tendencies in our minds, samskaras we call them. And it's these samskaras which prevent us from diving deep. The mind is following those, it doesn't want to go deep down, it's following those samskaras. So when Sri Ramakrishna says all sins vanish, means all these tendencies in our minds created by our mistakes in life, these are attenuated and ultimately destroyed simply through the remembrance of the divine, simply by thinking of the divine. And Sri Ramakrishna says, his name breaks the fetters of death. The power of the divine name. Sri Ramakrishna often emphasized this. Simply the name of God is enough if we can dive into it. So he says, you must dive, otherwise you can't get the gem. And then, of course, he breaks into song. So often he's teaching his disciples and inquirers, not only with philosophical points or encouragement, but through song. And through the power of that music, raising their minds also. And so this is the song that he sang for Bankim, this song which he has sung so many times. Dive deep, O my mind, dive, dive, dive into the depths of the ocean of divine beauty. If you can go to the very uttermost depths of that ocean, you'll find the supreme treasure, which is the gem of divine love, of prema, that infinite, all-encompassing love which washes away everything and overwhelms us in infinite bliss. It goes like this, the first line goes like this. Duba 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 rup shaburi amar mon. Ore duba 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 rup shaburi amar mon. Tolatol patal kunjale, tolatol patal kunjale, pabire prem ratnadhan, pabire prem ratnadhan. Duba 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 rup shaburi amar mon. So that dub, that means dive. The song is again and again encouraging. The singer is encouraging his or her own mind. Oh my mind, dive, dive, dive. If you really can dive, you'll get that supreme treasure, that divine love. So that's all we need. So that cork that's still holding us back, that we have to cut the ties, all the attachments, the aversions, the fears, the hang-ups, the inability to let go. These are what Sri Ramakrishna means by our sins. So here we have two contrasting analogies for spiritual life. The ascent and the dive. One way perhaps to look on this is to look on the Himalayan ascent as the struggle in spiritual life, the tremendous struggle for purity, the struggle to transcend, the struggle to lift our minds up, the struggle to attain illumination, the struggle to lift our minds from the mundane to the divine. It reminds us of the path of jnana, the path of wisdom, where we purify ourselves and discern and shed everything that is not God until we find the divine shining in our own hearts and in everything. Whereas the ocean represents depth, immersion in the divine, finding the divine everywhere, surrendering as we sink down into the embrace of the infinite waters, finding the unfathomable heart of being deep within. It's the dive into the source of all creation. And this perhaps is more like the path of bhakti, the path of devotion. So they seem to be different. But are they really different? Perhaps they are rather complementary. Perhaps But it's only by diving deep that we can ascend. And it is only by struggling to transcend, struggling to ascend, that we can begin to dive deep. And perhaps they meet, not in the external world, not in the external geography, but deep within us, in the cave of our heart. So I would like to shift gears a little bit and talk a little bit about an actual dive and an actual Himalayan ascent. Because, as some of you may know, I just returned from a pilgrimage to India, and I had the good fortune to dive into the divine atmosphere of India and visit some very holy places. And that is what inspired me to think of spiritual life in these terms of Himalayan ascent and oceanic depth diving, because I had the chance to visit some Himalayan shrines high in the mountains, and also to have not quite a dive into the ocean, but a holy dip in the Mother Ganga, Ganges. So let me tell you a little bit about those and see the parallels, how they might inform our understanding of spiritual life. So, the first place I want to talk about is Haridwar, or Haridwar. This is the city which is the gateway to the Himalayas. And the very name of the city means door. Dwar means doorway or gateway. And it's the gateway to the divine, the gateway to Hari, who is none other than God, the Lord. Sri Vishnu, Sri Krishna is called Hari. So it's Haridwar, the gateway to the Lord Hari. But it's also alternatively spelled Haridwar. And Har, or Hara, is the name of Shiva. So it's also the gateway into the Lord Shiva. Depending on how you spell it. It covers both Shiva and Vishnu. So it's a harmonious gateway to the Lord. And it is considered an ancient tirtha, an ancient place of pilgrimage, where there's water. A tirtha is typically a pilgrimage place where there's water. And we find in all the world's traditions, water is often found at places of pilgrimage. And that draws us. And at these tirthas, we find a fascinating mix, a fascinating kind of nexus of faith, history, mythology, scripture, and tradition. They all kind of mingle together to make a place holy. According to the legends, it is in Haridwar that the Mother Ganga descended from Shiva's locks. You know, Mother Ganga was brought down by the austerities of one king, Bhagiratha. And through his austerities, he brought Mother Ganga down. But she would come down with too much force and destroy the world. So instead, she lands on Shiva's head and on his matted locks. And he holds her there. And then King Bhagiratha does his penance to bring her down to earth, and Shiva releases her, where she lands, according to some, at Haridwar. So this is already this legend mixed with, yes, it's a fact. The Ganga is flowing beautifully and pure, so pure in Haridwar. She hasn't yet become polluted by all the factories downstream. So very pure water, and she's flowing there. And she is also called the Bhagirathi, because she was brought down by Bhagiratha to liberate his ancestors. And she's considered the holiest river of India. She is the one who cleanses us of all our misdeeds and grants us liberation. So then, there's also the ancient legend, the ancient story of the gods and the demons who are ever at war with each other. They're always fighting, the devas and the asuras. But one day they decide to pool their efforts and churn the ocean of milk. Now, we have to understand, this is mythology. It's not history. And yet, the mythology takes on a certain mystical reality. It doesn't have a historical reality, but it has a mystical reality, and it's deeply symbolic. So they decide to churn the ocean of milk, and they take the great serpent Vasuki and the Mount Meru, the great mountain, and they churn the ocean of milk to get the gems. But what comes up first? Poison. Terrible poison which is going to destroy all creation. So Shiva comes and drinks that poison and holds it in his throat, which is why his throat is blue. And so he saves the world that way. And then comes this amrit, this amrita, this nectar of immortality. And it comes in a big vessel, a kind of jar, which is called a kumbha. And of course, both the asuras and the devas want this for themselves. So they begin to fight over it. And somehow, in the course of fighting it, and the asuras steal it, and the devas steal it back, and 4 drops of that amrita fall to earth. And 1 drop falls in Haridwar. And 1 drop falls in Allahabad, now called Prayagraj. And 1 drop falls in Nashik, and 1 drop falls in Ujjain. And so since that time, every 12 years, a Kumbha Mela is celebrated, because a drop from the Kumbha fell at those places. So we see how the sacred geography of India is connected with the scripture and the legends and the mythology and all of that. So there's also history. At this Haridwar, where the Ganges is flowing, Ganga is there, there's a certain place called the Brahma Kunda. And that is the receptacle of Brahman itself. That is where that drop of nectar is said to have fallen. Our Holy Mother, Sri Sarada Devi, she visited that place after Sri Ramakrishna had left the body. And she brought with her some holy relics of Sri Ramakrishna. Some fingernails and hair clippings that she had saved. And she entered the water with those in her hands. And as she was entering the water, a wave came up, a wave of Mother Ganga, and took them away and accepted them, thus rendering the waters of the Ganga all the more holy. So the idea we have is that Mother Ganga is very purifying, and we lowly people go there to get purified, to get inspired, to get fulfilled. The great saints go there to add to the holiness. When the great saints take a bath in the Ganga, they add to the holiness, to the purifying power that Ma Ganga has. Sri Ramakrishna himself had tremendous faith in Mother Ganga as a visible manifestation of the divine on earth. So he would not use the Ganga water for the kinds of things that we use, some of the, for cleaning dirty things. He would use it for taking his bath, but not, say, for washing himself after going to the toilet. So he had that reverence for Mother Ganga. So, on the Mahalaya day, this is a holy day in Hinduism, the beginning of the Navaratri, which culminates in Bengal in the Durga Puja and in other places, other big festivals. So Mahalaya is considered a very holy day. One of the brahmachari brothers, novice brothers of mine at the Konkhal Monastery, and we set out for this Brahma Kunda to have a holy dip. And as we're approaching the place, we find there's people everywhere. There's throngs of people coming. For what? They're coming to have a dip in the holy Ganga. And we reach that area where the dip is done, and there are people lining the banks everywhere. Everywhere in that area, the banks are made of stone steps going into the water. So everywhere people can get into the water. And there must be tens of thousands of people there. And I thought, wow, it is so crowded. And I mentioned that to my brother. He said, this is not crowded. This is nothing. Because he's in the Kumbh Mela, I suppose, when it's literally millions of people who throng the place. But how amazing to see so many people drawn by this holy spot, coming to have their bath. And so many of them doing their own rituals. There are some village women, and they're preparing little offerings. They had some incense. They're making incense. They have the charcoal and oil mix and with some herbs, and they're rolling it into little balls and then making little cones of incense, and then they light it and put it on a little leaf to float it out onto the water. And other people, there's priests chanting holy mantras. And so I had brought with me, in addition to my body, I had brought a little bit of the holy ashes, you can say, the cremated remains of one of our brother monks. Perhaps some of you remember our Swami Shiva, Swami Mahayogananda, who died in probably, I forget now, 22 or something, 2022. So he had been his body had been cremated and his ashes had been immersed in the Pacific Ocean. But we kept just a small handful for India. So I brought that with me in a Ziploc bag, to be practical. And so I had this Ziploc bag with me. So my brother and I were preparing. We found a little passage between the thronging people, a kind of little passage where we could get down to the water. And so we took turns, so he could hold my bag, and then I changed into a little towel, and he kept my clothes, and I went with this Ziploc bag. First, we chanted all the Shanti mantras, the peace mantras we could remember, the ones that we start our talks with. We chanted a whole bunch of them. And meanwhile, there's sound going on, people talking, shouting everywhere, but we are focused. So we also did our own shouting, our own chanting together, focusing our minds on these holy mantras, chanting the mantras. And then I entered the water and offered those remaining ashes to Mother Ganga. And it's a kind of living experience. The water is living, it's alive, it's flowing. As I entered deeper, suddenly I found I'm being swept away downstream and realized, oh, it's a river. And had to swim back up and immersed my body completely in the water. And it gives a tremendous feeling of cleansing, of purifying. Is it scientifically provable? We all feel it. It's something to be felt, something to be experienced. With so many people have that intense faith, something happens. Our own faith is deepened. Our experience is that we feel purified and uplifted and elevated. And I had this strong sense that of our brother Shiva, Swami Mahayogananda, his final bit of his remains of his body being immersed in this holy water on this holy day. And feeling that, yes, he is completely, of course, already he is perfectly fine. He has left the body long back. He was a lifelong practitioner. He had a powerful guru. No worries for him. But still, it was a beautiful experience to offer that. And then I came out, and my brother changed into his towel, and I held his clothes, and he went in and had his dip. And we went back to the monastery. So India is really, as I was hinting, it's this land of sacred geography, where the mythology and the scripture and the history and all combine to create this kind of sacred geography. There are, for instance, Shakti Pithas, the great centers of power, where, especially dedicated to the worship of Divine Mother. And that's connected with the legend of Sati, who went to her father's place. She's married to Shiva, but she goes to her father's place, Daksha, and Daksha doesn't like Shiva, so he criticizes Shiva, and she's so offended that she dies on the spot. And then Shiva comes and in grief takes up Sati's body and starts dancing a mad dance of destruction, and he's going to destroy the whole universe. He's so furious. And then Vishnu has to come and cuts up the body of Sati with his discus and cuts it into 52 parts, and they fall in different parts of India. Everywhere where a part of her body falls, there's a Shakti Pitha, a special center of divine power where the Divine Mother is worshipped. So this is how mythology and scripture join with history, because historically many saints have also practiced there. They have visited those Shakti Pithas, they have practiced there, meditated, prayed, and when we go there, we feel something. We feel the holiness of the place. And surely those who founded those places must have felt the holy vibrations of those places. Oftentimes they are in places of tremendous beauty, like mountain tops. And we have lost that tradition here, but we had it. The native peoples of this continent had understood the sacred geography of this land, and they had places which they considered very sacred, where they would go for their prayer and their communion with the divine. So it is sad that we have lost it. We need to reclaim it. So there's also in India what are called the Jyotirlingas, the great columns of light, the great emblems of Shiva that are considered eternal and infinite. And Shiva is not conceived of as having a form, but as being an infinite column of light. And some of these temples are Jyotirlingas, they're called. They're part of the sacred geography of India. So one of these is called Kedarnath in the Himalayas, and I had the tremendous blessing to make that pilgrimage. It's one of the few pilgrimages left where you actually have to walk. Most of the pilgrimages now you can take a bus or a car even to many of the high Himalayan temples. But this one you actually have to walk. And it's also steeped in this tradition. It is said to be, the temple is said to have been built by the Pandavas. Arjuna and his brothers supposedly built this temple. It's a mix of mythology and history, of course. Whether they were the actual ones, we don't know, but that's the tradition. And then they did their austerities there to enter the Svargaloka, to enter heaven. And Shankaracharya, the great teacher of non-dualism, is said to have left his body in Kedarnath. He went there and he wandered off into the snows and never came back. So that's how he left his body. And then one of the tributaries of Ma Ganga flows from Kedarnath, the source of the Mandakini, one of the several important tributaries of Ganga. So it's a pretty long and grueling trek. 9 miles, 16 kilometers, up and up and up a steep trail, a path paved with rough-hewn stones and filled with pilgrims, trudging up and up, step by step. Most of us had a stick in hand that was helpful to keep the balance. The air is getting thin, we're breathing hard, and that helps keep the balance, and it also keeps the horses at bay. Because if you can't walk, there's also the option to ride a horse. And that sounds great, but actually it's not so easy as it sounds. I saw from the pilgrims there, they're perched on these horses, and there's a risk of falling off. I saw someone fall off a horse. So it's also, and there's the hazard of getting saddle sore. I think anyone who's not used to riding a horse, by the time it's over, they can hardly walk when they reach the top. So it's a difficult trek to get up there. And so what do we do as we're walking up? What else can we do? We take the holy name, we take the name of the Lord. We chant the holy name of Shiva with every step. And that's how I made it 9 miles up there. I wouldn't have been able to do it without that. Chanting at every step the holy name. And everybody's got the name of Shiva on their lips. And we greet each other with Hara Hara or Mahadev, or the different names of Shiva being uttered. Bholanath, Jai Bholanath, like that, where everyone is chanting different names of Shiva as we're going up. Those who are coming down, you can see the relief on their faces, the joy on their faces. They're coming down now. And we're going up, but we're all chanting the name of Shiva. So, and for what? All for a chance to touch the Lord. In the temple of Kedarnath, there's a large natural stone, a stone there in the temple, which was there, the temple was built around it. That is the emblem of Shiva. And the pilgrims are permitted to touch that. So they feel that they're touching the Lord himself. And I also had plucked some bell leaves at our monastery. These bell leaves are sacred to Shiva. I found 4 perfect bell leaves, and I anointed them with sandal paste, and then I put them between the leaves of my journal so that they're protected. And I brought that journal with me into the temple, and so when I reached the temple, I could open that journal and offer those leaves on the emblem of Shiva. So it was a beautiful experience. So the trek itself actually becomes a kind of spiritual experience because we become permeated with the divine name. It's almost like the higher we climb, the more we are diving deep into the divine name. As I said, the name is on all lips, it's reverberating in all hearts, and we start to feel that the Lord is all around us, and I'm going to meet the Lord in the Himalayas, but He's already here all around us, and He's in my heart, and He's in all the hearts, and the goal may be the Lord, but the path also is the Lord. And there's this tremendous feeling of communion with the pilgrims. We're all going together, and we're all committed to making this arduous trek to finally reach the holy precincts of the temple and offer our worship there. And once we reach the temple, we realize that actually at least half of the pilgrimage, half of the point of it is just getting there. That yes, we reach the temple and we have the joy of the darshan and the offering our worship, but it was the getting there that prepared us for it. It was that trek up the mountain, struggling, keeping the name on our lips, that prepared us for the experience. And perhaps that was actually the most important part of the pilgrimage, that purifying struggle. And there's also in the Himalayas this natural beauty. This tremendous beauty is not a word that captures the experience. It's a majesty, it's a glory, it's an awesomeness that enhances our experience, of course, of being immersed in the divine. We have these mountains, they seem to be the veritable manifestations of divinity on earth. They're vast, they're infinite, they're the largest things that we have on earth. And it's hard to describe that feeling of seeing the Himalayas for the first time, because we can't conceive of their vastness until we see them. Many of us may have seen mountain peaks. There's the Sierra Nevadas. They've got snow-capped peaks. They're beautiful, no doubt. And there's the Rocky Mountains in Colorado. They're beautiful, they're big, they're snow-capped. There's the Swiss mountains in the Alps. The Alps, they're also snow-capped, they're beautiful. But then there's the Himalayas, and words fall away and faced with the immensity. So no wonder the ancient pilgrims, the ancient seekers who went to the mountains, they saw these and felt that they were face to face with God. Why is it that we don't tire of looking at these mountains? At least that was my experience. After Kedarnath, I made another pilgrimage to an even higher Shiva temple, which was in some ways even more blessed because there were very few people on that pilgrimage. It's called the Tunganath. And behind the Tunganath temple is a small peak called the Chandrashila peak. And reaching the top of that peak, you get this tremendous view of 180 degrees of mountains, of that high Himalayan snow peaks. And I didn't get tired of looking at them. I felt like I could look at them for eternity, just looking and looking and looking. Why? Why do we feel that? I think it's because the external glory, the external majesty of these peaks reminds us of the majesty of our own soul, the glory of our own soul. Swami Vivekananda would say, stand on the glory of your own soul. Yes, seeing the external glory reminds us that we are glorious. Actually, they are not beautiful in and of themselves. It is we who make them beautiful. It is we who see the beauty. So Swami Vivekananda points out all beauty, external beauty, actually comes from within us. The beauty is here. We see it there. It is we who make it beautiful. So when he was with Sister Nivedita in the Mediterranean, and they had a tremendously beautiful view, a breathtaking view at sunset the island of Messina with Mount Vesuvius in eruption and the moon is rising and it's so beautiful. And then Swami Vivekananda says, Messina must thank me. It is I who give her all her beauty. So, ultimately, all beauty is within. So, there's this external sacred geography that we find, especially in India, this sacred geography of sacred mountains and rivers and temples in beautiful places and all of that. We have also, I'd like to suggest, a sacred geography within us. And that is really the geography that we need to learn to navigate and to find. And as it were, we have the different centers of consciousness called chakras, which are located, yes, in our bodies, in our subtle bodies, and they have their corresponding physical counterparts. And we have the nerve channels, particularly the channels which run along the spine, and the central channel. They're like sacred rivers. If we can enter that sacred river, that river will take us to the divine. The Himalayan ascent of our own inner geography means bringing our mind up from these lower centers, these chakras in the lower half of the body, and bringing the mind up to the chakras in the upper half of the body. And ultimately reaching the summit, which is that 1,000-petaled lotus, which is described by the yogis as being in the brain, or just above the head. There's this 1,000-petaled lotus, and when the mind ascends there, one attains union with the divine. And then, again, the oceanic dive, the dive within, is also a dive within. We're diving into the heart, deep within the heart. Just as when we dive into water, the sound gets all muted, everything becomes quiet, we let go of everything and just go within, quietly, deep down within, until we reach the depths of the heart. Finding that cave of the heart deep within and entering there. So this is how, even if we don't have the chance to do a pilgrimage to the Himalayas, we have our own Himalayas within us. And that pilgrimage we are called to make. Ramakrishna gives extensive descriptions of these centers within us. And I think we won't go into the full details, but he describes how most people, the worldly-minded people, they're not spiritually minded. The mind dwells at the 3 lower chakras, which are situated at the organs at the navel and the organs of generation, the sexual organs, and the organ of evacuation. So he says that after great effort and spiritual practice, the Kundalini is awakened, that spiritual force which lies within us. And as it's awakened, it rises, and it rises past these first 3 chakras to the center at the heart. And Sri Ramakrishna describes beautifully what happens then. He says, the Kundalini, when awakened, passes through the lower centers and comes to the Anahata, which is at the heart. It stays there. At that time, the mind of the aspirant is withdrawn from the lower centers and feels the awakening of divine consciousness and sees light. In mute wonder, the aspirant sees that radiance and cries out, "What is this? What is this?" It's such an experience when the heart opens, when we reach to that level that we can only cry out in wonder, "What is this? What is this?" Like that glimpse, that first glimpse of the Himalayas, when what is this? What is this tremendous, awesome beauty? And then he notes that there's another chakra at the level of the throat. And when the Kundalini reaches this plane, one wants to hear and talk only of God and can't stand even the thought or hear anybody talk about anything other than spiritual subjects. And then there's the center between the eyebrows, the Ajna chakra. And when the Kundalini reaches this, the aspirant sees the form of the divine. But there remains a slight barrier. It's like the light inside a lantern, he says. You feel like you could touch the light, but there's glass, so you can't. And then what happens? Last of all, he says, is the seventh plane, which according to Tantra is the center of the 1,000-petaled lotus. When the Kundalini arrives there, the aspirant enters Samadhi, that complete and total absorption. And in that lotus dwells Satchidananda Shiva, the Absolute. There, Kundalini, the awakened power, unites with Shiva. This is known as the union of Shiva and Shakti. The unconditioned Absolute and the manifestation, the power, they merge in union. And the goal of spiritual life is attained. It strikes me that there's a beautiful circularity, a full circle in the natural world. We talked about the Himalayan peaks and how they're just covered with snow and ice, and so otherworldly. They are beyond this world, and that has been my experience. When the further up we go, the more we feel like I'm not in the world that I know, because there are no more trees, then there are no more grasses, then there's only rock and snow and water, and it's like I'm in a different world. And what happens to that ice? Well, in summer it melts. Summer it melts. And that water flows down and goes down into little rivulets which flow into bigger rivers. And what happens? They join the Ganga. They join the Ganges. At least some of that ice melts into the Ganges, that Mother Ganga who brings liberation, who brings blessings to all humanity, and brings liberation, and also brings food, because it is her waters that enable agriculture all along the banks of the Ganga, and life thrives on the riverbanks. And then what happens? She empties into the ocean, and her waters mingle with the ocean and fill the ocean, pervade the ocean too, and even descend to the uttermost depths of the ocean. And then, as the sun shines on the ocean's waters, the water rises up out of the ocean as water vapor and forms clouds. And surely some of these clouds are pushed by the wind and caress the Himalayan peaks, and then shower down snow, so that again, so that the circle has been completed, and the peaks are again rendered so exquisitely beautiful and white and pure. And we too, in our spiritual life, we strive both to ascend to the heights of illumination and to the very depths of our inner being, uniting the two directions, uniting the upward and inward, till we find the divine. We reach the ocean and the mountain peak. We find the divine both within and without, shining in our own hearts and in the hearts of all beings. So may we attain that fulfilling realization in this life itself. It's my prayer. Thank you very much. Yam Brahma Varunendra Rudra Marutaha Stunvanti Divdaistavai Vedaya Sangapada Kramopanishadai Gayanti Yam Samaga Dhyanavastita Tadgatena Manasa Pashyanti Yam Yogino Yasyam Tanna Vidu Sura Suragana Devaya Tasmai Namaha. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Our salutations to Him who is the truth of life and existence, and whom the sages call by various names. Our salutations to Him whose glory is sung in the sacred hymns of the various scriptures of the world, but whose limitless and infinite grandeur no mortal mind can comprehend. Our salutations to Him on whom the devotees meditate in the shrine of their hearts, and realize His ineffable presence in their deepest contemplations. May He illumine our understanding and prompt our minds to the path of truth and righteousness. May He reveal Himself unto our souls and dispel the gloom of delusion, fear, doubt, and darkness. Om, peace, peace, peace.